Another part of the AWARE program, hazard communications. You may hear it referred to as Employee Right to Know or MRKA, Minnesota Right to Know Act. Your right to know. I'm sure that Einstein knew what we were going to learn today. Objective: define hazard communications. List 3 ways that your employer may communicate information on chemical hazards to you. Define MSDS. Discuss label container safety. List 4 types of information you may want on a chemical warning label. And discuss first aid procedures for hazardous chemical exposure. The Right to Know Act, again, as part of the AWARE, and OSHA was Right to Know, and Minnesota is Right to Know. 25 million Americans are exposed to chemical hazards every day. Chemicals can threaten your safety, cause fires or accidents, and jeopardize your health. So what do? Well, we need to know where to find the information about the chemicals we work with. We can find it on the bottle's label. What do you do if the bottle's label is defective? Well, you need to tell your supervisor and replace the label. And if you don't know what it is and someone's been exposed, you need to lightly smell it, note the color and consistency of the liquid, and try to figure out what it is. If not, you know, if they're had a good dose of the chemical, you just bring them to the ER and they'll deal with it. Where do we find out what first aid is needed if we're exposed to a chemical? The bottle label has it sometimes, I'd say almost all the time. The MSDS material safety data sheet has it. We keep those in a notebook, and I'll show you those at the end of this. The employee training and information, we would tell you what to do depending on what chemical you're exposed with. For instance, the nurses had a particular medication that you couldn't hold against your bare skin, and so we had to wear gloves, and we made sure everybody knew that. OSHA, mandatory info on container. You have to have a chemical name. You have to have a manufacturer and the address. You have to have precautions you need to take with the chemical. And labels are not needed for portable containers, but make sure that you're going to use it and discard it very quickly. Additional information on bottles. Sometimes they'll be rated danger, warning, caution. They'll be marked poison, perhaps. Talk to you what happens if you're exposed to them, what the MD needs to treat you for, any kind of fire chemical spill instructions, and how to handle and store it. All employees have information about the chemicals they work with in these books. What does MSDS stand for? The Material Safety Data Sheet. It tells us how to use chemicals, transport, store, use measures to protect ourselves. We don't have any chemicals that is required for that much protection. And first aid procedures. They also tell you about the date that the MSDS was made up, because it's possible it was made up 10 years ago. They may have found some other problems with a chemical that you would need an updated MSDS sheet. The identity of the chemical used is on there, and also common names for the chemical. Physical characteristics, if it's reactive and what it looks like. Physical hazards, such as being combustible, very reactive, unstable. Health hazards, what happens if you're exposed. If you're exposed, you know, right away and it's an irritant, it may give you a rash or actually burn your hand. The sensitizer, over time you'll have problems with it. Corrosive, again, it would burn your hand. Toxic, that it could kill you. And carcinogenic, it can cause cancer. Medical conditions aggravated by exposure. Asthma is a popular one. Like if my son isn't near any kind of a pneumonia or a cigarette smoke, he'll start to have an asthma attack. Primary routes of entry would be inhalation or transdermal through your skin. Any kind of air exposure is talked about on the MSDS, how apt it is to cause cancer, how to handle it, you know, how to get rid of it when you're done with it. control measures, meaning use protective equipment, and again, first aid. Probably the most important thing, and also what you would be most likely to look for. The locations of the aware book. Everyone is responsible for knowing what's in the aware book and knowing where it is. The state loves to ask that question. So the location. In nursing, as I said earlier in this whole presentation, it's under the desk. Maintenance is on their desk in their office. Kitchen is on the very end in the metal cabinet, upper middle cabinet. And laundry is on the clean side in the drawer near the opening to the dryer and washing machine room. Business office, it's over here. Activities, it's on the back bookcase. Looking to see policies. Must be this one. Lakeville is in the closet, which goes out to St. Mary's Street, and there it is there. And the eye wash machines, if you're going on the tour, you'll get a first-hand look at them. This is a nurse's station here, and the shower room is right off of it, and this is where the eye wash station is. These eye wash stations, you just flip down this yellow piece, and room temperature water comes spurting out, and then you just put the person's eyes in there. In the kitchen's break room, you know how they break over there. If you go through that door, it's right around the metal cabinet.